My name is Dannielle Hayes, and I'm a writer and an illustrator and publisher, but I spent more than 40 years as a professional photographer. I was born in Quebec City in 1943, so that makes me a war baby. My parents were a great influence on me. They were both adventurers in their own way. My mother was used to ride bareback on her horse across the prairies, and also she was at age 18. She was a member of of an all women's hockey team. My father was a also grew up in the prairies. Was a bush pilot for a while, and he was also a journalist for Winnipeg Free Press. I first discovered my interest in photography when I was going through old photo albums that belonged to my family, and I would ask about certain people in the photographs if I didn't know them, and it usually elicited some kind of story or several stories. Actually, I was going to be an architect, and as such, I had learned how to do architectural renderings with a man called Alan Edwards, who formed the Federation of Canadian Artists down here on Granville Island. He called me up one day and said, "Dannielle, how would you like to move to New York?" I said, "Yes," immediately. I was trying to get out of a relationship at the time, so this was a perfect excuse. Well, then, to further my education in architecture, I applied to Cooper Union, which at the time was the only free university in North America. And I was only one of two women who were accepted into the School of Architecture. So I studied architecture for 2 years, but then I didn't think that I would be living in New York for that long, as it would take me to get my registered architect license. So I switched over to fine arts, and that's when I took a photography course. I also moved in with my boyfriend, who was a struggling photographer. Our apartment was like one huge dark room. And I remember the bathroom was where we had the enlarger, so there was a big piece of plywood and the enlarger sitting on it. So if you wanted to have a bath, you would have to crawl under this big piece of plywood and have a bath and then crawl out of it. It was kind of a inconvenience, but quite interesting because then I learned how to do black and white photography from there. My photography career has taken me pretty much all over the world. I did a lot of shooting for United Nations, UNICEF and UNDP and World Bank, and I would piggyback assignments. So say I was in Senegal, and so I would be shooting for maybe UNICEF and World Bank and UNDP, and so I'd go from one place to the other place, and the more remote the better. I liked it. So I didn't go to big touristy places. I would go off into the desert or in small villages, dance with the people. And so not too long, actually maybe about 15 years ago, I was invited to Uganda, and there were 3 of us photographers, and we went up to Bwindi National Park, and a couple of weeks before that, there had been some rebels who had come across the border through the jungle and over the mountain from the Republic of Congo, and they had shot some of the park rangers and some tourists. I believe they were German tourists. There was about 8 people who were killed. So when 3 of us arrived, they weren't taking any chances, and so we had half of the Ugandan army, escorting us up this mountain. And I even had one guy who was carrying my lunch, which I gave to him. And we came up, we went up the muddy slopes of this mountain, and finally we came across this family of gorillas, mountain gorillas. And I was about 10 feet away from this silverback. And the silverback is the dominant male. And he was just lying back and eating some leaves, chewing on some leaves, and kind of eyeballing us. And then all of a sudden he got up, and I thought, oh my God, I thought King Kong. He looked just like King Kong, so I said, I'm not Fay Ray, I'm not Fay Ray. One of the most dangerous jobs I had was in Niger, which is in French West Africa. And it was a job for UNDP, which is United Nations Development Program. And they had a cheese-making project in one of the villages, which had been taken over by the Tuareg people who traveled the Sahara Desert by horseback and by camel. And they had taken over this little village. And so we were met by an armed guard who pointed an AK-47 at us. And so we had to back down and then go back the following week, actually. But the Tuareg people had stolen the UN vehicle and whatever money there was and all the cheese. My most happy memory, maybe when I gave birth to my daughter. I was delivered by midwives in the middle of New York City, and so midwife had a camera, which is a Super 8 camera at the time. My husband had a camera, so we filmed the whole birth of my daughter, and that became a midwifery training film after a while. I've had some pretty amazing experiences with a particular hallucinogenic called ayahuasca. So Dimitri, who was this photographer who lived in Iquitos, picked me up on the back of his motorbike, and we went down to the banks of the Amazon, where the shaman was cooking up the ayahuasca, which essentially is taken from the bark of a tree and then mixed with honey so it's palatable. We get out to this barn and outside of town, and the knock on the door of this house with the barn, and there's another shaman who meets us and said that he had already had his dinner. He pats his belly. So he said, but I will be one of your spiritual brothers. So we went into this barn. It was completely dark. And we had brought some cigarettes for the ceremony. I think that was it, cigarettes. And I could hear some pigs snorting, and I could hear a rooster sort of shuffling around. And I asked if I could record the ceremony, and the shaman said yes. So I set up my tape recorder, and then he gave us a small glassfuls of the ayahuasca, and then I started to go into a more of a hallucinogenic experience, and my father appeared first of all, and my father had been killed in his plane about 50 years before. So I interpreted that I was doing some research about my father's death, essentially, and so I figured out that I would find out something about my father, but not everything. And then my husband appeared, and ayahuasca is meant to put you in touch with the spirits of the dead. And it was And my husband had been killed about 6 months before that. And so my husband appeared after that in sort of baggy shorts and asking my forgiveness. So I guess I forgave him. I remembered certain times in our honeymoon when we were crawling up this hill in Nova Scotia, feeding on wild strawberries. So these wonderful moments started to come back. Oh, well, my shoes. I was asked to do a sort of a life story. So I thought, well, I've traveled to all these different countries. So I made a list, which I called the shoe list of countries where my feet have trod. And I started at the beginning of the alphabet with Abu Dhabi and ended in Zambia, I think it was. Probably the most painful experience I had was having a stroke in 2010, which meant the end of my career as a photographer. And actually I had gone into a coma. And my daughter told me years afterwards, she said, "Oh yes, Mom, you were in a coma for about a week. But you came out of the coma laughing and telling jokes." So they thought, "Oh, that's okay, she'll be fine." I am most proud of, actually there are several different accomplishments that I'm most proud of. So I formed Professional Women Photographers in 1975, which is still going strong, all volunteer women photographers. And we offer a scholarship to young women who want to become photographers. And also, I guess, the 3 books that I've published. And going around the world in 8 months.
I'm kind of happy, not too happy.
I'm not quite sure how people will remember me. I'm sure that they'll remember me as a photographer, and I'm fairly generous. Although I don't have much money, but I'm generous with my time, and I have many friends, who support me, and I support them, and I hope that they remember that I have a sense of humor, great sense of humor, I might say.